Dear students, in this lesson we are going to focus on how to recognize and evaluate arguments. First, we need to know that an argument is a list of statements, of course, assumptions, premises that are used to make a conclusion. So, people normally make conclusions or opinions depending on certain assumptions or premises. Now, making a conclusion or an opinion needs to have some sort of assumptions, premises, examples. For the premises and assumptions, people have to give pieces of evidence, and the pieces of evidence need to be strong enough to persuade people, to convince them of the idea the speaker or the writer are trying to convey. For example, we have this statement: Hawaii has hot weather throughout the year. It also has beautiful beaches, so it's the best place for a holiday. Now the conclusion is this: Hawaii is the best place for a holiday. What are the premises, assumptions? Because of the hot weather and the beautiful beaches. So the person here is giving two ideas, two pieces of evidence to support the conclusion. When people make conclusions and give arguments and support their arguments with examples, language clues should be used. So some language components or items include, for example, since, which means because. After because, you give your reason for the conclusion that you are making. Firstly, secondly, for, as, after, all are also used for arguments. For example, for is used to give a reason. As is also used to give a reason. For example, Oman is a beautiful country as it has a lot of magnificent places. After all is also a conjunction that can be used to make a conclusion after mentioning previously some ideas or premises, assuming that in view of the fact that here people mention the reasons, and after the reasons they mention the conclusion or the effect. Follows from, as shown, indicated by. Also, these are some language items that people use in order to explain their arguments clearly. For example, as shown in this presentation, comma, arguments can be made using strong pieces of evidence. Also, maybe in third, deduced, derived from. When you give a specific conclusion here and you want to mention the source of that conclusion or the reason for giving that conclusion, you can use these language items. For example, the opinion of the author is derived from his previous experiences that he had when he was a child. Also, therefore, so it follows that, to mention some sort of results after mentioning some causes previously. Hence, consequently, can also be used to give results. Verbs like suggests, proves, demonstrates can also be used in argumentative compositions. For example, this study suggests that, and then you mention the conclusion. Entails, implies. Again, these are two language items or verbs that can be used in the argumentative composition. Let's read this. Mobile phones can lead to serious health problems. Several studies have shown that excessive use of mobile phones can damage sight. According to eye specialists, mobile phones are the cause of poor vision in young adults. Now, what are the pieces of evidence the person is given? First, excessive use of mobile phones can damage sight. Okay, that's the reason the person is given. And look at the language that's used. Have shown that. According to eye specialists, again, that's another language item that can be used to give arguments. Now, how to evaluate arguments? People evaluate arguments by looking at the evidence, whether the evidence is sufficient or is not sufficient to support the conclusion that they are making. For example, if a person gives a conclusion based on certain pieces of evidence, people might want to look at whether there are other possible explanations for that conclusion, because a good conclusion is a conclusion that was made from one possible explanation. The evidence, of course, needs to be convincing enough for people to believe. Let's go back to the statements that we have read previously. Now, if you want to evaluate these arguments, you might want to ask, is there sufficient evidence that the writer has given for Hawaii to be a very beautiful place? For example, the second statement or the second example about mobile phones. Now, the person has given some pieces of evidence like the studies or like what specialists have said. Now, are these enough pieces of evidence to support the conclusion that the person or the writer has made? We should evaluate this. And we have, of course, to remember a conclusion doesn't always mean it's a good conclusion because it has certain facts or it's based on certain facts. We have to evaluate the facts first. Are they convincing facts? Are they real facts? Or are they misleading facts? We have to evaluate this. We have to consider this before evaluating an argument.